The sitting is resumed.
Announcements by His Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the President. Petitions, papers.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the reports of the Judicial Council for the years 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. I'm also commanded to lay the loan contract number 5980 OC-BA between the Government of Barbados and the Inter-American Development Bank program to strengthen social services to Barbados in Barbados. Loan contract between the Government of Barbados and the Corporación Andina de Fomento, CAF, Development Bank of Latin America, and the Caribbean Sector-Wide Approach Program to support the operation Roots from Cultural Heritage to Innovation in Barbados, February 21st, 2025.
Government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, or replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The questions that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day sitting.
Government business.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 10. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Tourism and International Transport, to move the second reading of the Seaport Industry Management Operations and Development Bill 2025.
Honourable Mr. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In moving the second reading of the Seaport Industry Management Operations and Development Bill 2025, I want to inform the Honourable Chamber that I will also be using this debate to give the Chamber and the country at large, of course, a comprehensive and detailed insights into the operations issues and, of course, the planned improvements and projected developments at our one-of-a-kind national institution, the Barbados Port Inc. Mr. Speaker, my report of this sector will cover both the nautical and the landside activities. Of course, it is based on the collective experience and the commitment to professionalism at all levels within the departments, the divisions, of course, and the entities concerned. I am proud and thankful for their continued guidance and productivity at all levels. Mr. Speaker, I wish to assure all citizens that as we press ahead with our future growth and development activities and, of course, improvement plans, that they will be done only after subjecting operations to intense critical thinking, internal reviews, consideration of external input and access to the highest and latest international operation standards. We will be following through, obviously, with action plans that are well conceptualized, soundly structured, and coherent, fully aware that we will at some time have to be nimble enough to respond to the unforeseen developments. In other words, Mr. Speaker, our shipping matters will have safe, well-equipped hands at the wheel with equally well-resourced and capable leadership leading the change on shore. And that is where, Mr. Speaker, I wish to begin, because you will recall that over the past year, I have had the privilege of introducing into this very august chamber a number of legislation. I believe the last count we had 9, and this one will be 10th bill that we've had an opportunity to debate right here in this chamber. And the Seaport Industry Bill gives us a clear understanding for the regulatory framework for the management operations of and development of national seaports. Of course, Mr. Speaker, it covers and defines everything within the maritime sector, those activities that we need to familiarize ourselves with and that we also need to embed in the laws of Barbados. Of course, the activities will definitely center around commerce and trade and land-sea interface, coastal and shoreside activities, offshore maritime activities, and of course, the service providers and other interests directly and indirectly that we engage in from time to time. Of course, Mr. Speaker, it goes without saying that seaports are critical infrastructure that continue to support economic growth and development globally. And of course, the supporting regulatory framework that we have in Barbados and that we've been working on will certainly help us to continue to maintain that competitiveness that we need in this sector, and of course to ensure that our seaports, not only based on location, that we have the appropriate tools to embed all of our maritime activities into the global shipping supply chain. Of course, seaports remain the focal points for securing all that I've said above, and therefore it is intended that this bill will certainly advance the interests of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, I would have articulated this on a number of occasions. Back in 2018, there was an audit done. The audit by the International Maritime Organization had revealed a number of deficiencies, and therefore we moved with alacrity to ensure that we address the requisite deficiencies. So we're here again today to deal with this bill, and as an IMO member state, Barbados has specific seaport and specific other obligations for which we must comply. Once the seaport bill is enacted, it will certainly correct those deficiencies that were identified as part of the 2018 audit. The bill, of course, addresses the deficiencies identified in that audit, and I will review the bill by clauses so that we can have a better understanding. But importantly, Mr. Speaker, what is necessary in this particular bill, that it creates the enabling environment for Barbados to become a leading transshipment hub, as well as to achieve and maintain sustainable seaport industry. Of course, seaports are a base of industrial development. It's centered around shipping and port activities and maintain vital linkages between seaport industry and the maritime sector, particularly transport and the logistics market. And the framework in terms of the bill, which also sets up what we're trying to achieve, will have obviously satisfied key pillars of our national policy on international shipping. And I'll remind the Honourable Chamber of those 6 pillars. We had pillar one, efficient shipping. And one of the goals of this pillar is to create and promote economic growth for shipping interests for the government and people of Barbados. It also must be noted that one of the action steps in support of pillar 1 of the national policy is to develop an intelligent port strategy to enable the Port of Bridgetown to, over time, to interface with emerging autonomous ships. Of course, this autonomous vessel operation code for ships, which obviously is part of the Barbados Port Inc., has a duty to assist in the development of the said code. Pillar 2 focused on shipping on clean oceans. This pillar focused on the general duty to protect the marine environment from the impacts of shipping, including post-related activities. As again, we are well aware, the IMO places a duty on seaports, for instance, to undertake appropriate measures to prevent, reduce, and control pollution in ports, and there are a number of port-specific environmental requirements as stipulated within the bill. Pillar 3, focus on safe shipping. This bill is concerned with promoting, of course, safety throughout the shipping industry, including ports. And Pillar 4 speaks to the issue of secure shipping. Of course, an objective here is to enhance port security at the ship's port interface in respect of ships calling at the Bridgetown port. The bill places a duty on the Barbados Port Inc. to ensure that maritime safety and security in the exercise of its functions, in addition to complying with the applicable safety and security requirements of the International Maritime Organization. Pillar 5 speaks to building resistance against vulnerabilities in shipping. Obviously, it speaks to the whole issue of decarbonization of long-distance shipping activities from sea to port, in line, again, with the climate agenda of the International Maritime Organization. And Pillar 6, speaking to shipping governance, which includes governance of all shipping activities, including activities taking place in seaports. The key features of the Seaport Industry Bill, if we look at Part 1, Clauses 1 to 4 of the Seaport Industry Bill, it sets out the preliminary matters in respect of the bill, including its purpose, which according to Clause 3, are to provide a regulatory framework for the management, operation, and development of national seaports, to promote an economically viable, ecologically sustainable, and socially and culturally responsible national seaport industry, and to ensure effective shoreside support for maritime transport sector, as well as D, to support an integrated approach to shipping, particularly at the ship port reference. If we go to page 16, clauses 5 to 6, which is part of Part 2, the bill outlines the administrative framework for the management and development of Barbados' seaport industry. Clause 5 outlines the powers that the Barbados Port Inc. in relation to the Bridgetown port, any other seaport developed at the minister's request, and of course, any other seaports that may from time to time have to be labeled accordingly. The powers include general seaport management, the exercise of regulatory controls over persons or organizations, vessels, and vehicles in any port facility. It speaks to the entry into agreement necessary to support the continual management and operations and development of the seaport industry. Of course, it sets out payment, collections, dues, or apportionment of any rates arising from the provision of port-specific services. It speaks to as well to designate special areas for port development, issuing licenses, permits, and other instruments. Of course, adopting incentive schemes, doing anything that is necessary for the effective performance. So there are wide powers associated with the bill bestowed on the Barbados Port Inc. Of course, under this legislation, it is regulated by Clause 5.2, which requires the Barbados Port Inc. in exercising its authority to do so under this law or any other enactments in which powers are specified in relation to the Bridgetown Port Inc., and to do so in a matter that supports national, regional, and international trade and commerce. In other words, these powers must not be exercised in a way that would be detrimental to maritime trade and commerce. Clause 6 of the bill, it outlines the duties of the Barbados Port Inc. Those duties include exercising its functions and carrying out activities in a very safe, secure, and environmentally sound manner. Of course, we have to comply with the United Nations law and the Convention of the Sea and all the various instruments associated with the International Maritime Organization, including the very specific instruments relating to the International Labour Organization, for which we have a duty. The duties as set out in the legislation will also assist the coastal and maritime environmental protection and preservation efforts. It will also be involved in regulating, in consultation, of course, with stakeholders, provisioning, home porting, seaport partnerships, and of course, all of those agreements that are necessary for the further build-up of the port. Part 3, clauses 7 on page 22, clauses 7 to 13. The bill sets forth the regime for the development and implementation of a national seaport industry sustainability program. The National Seaport Industry Sustainability Program is Barbados' national level equivalent to that of World Port Sustainability Program. Of course, you will note that the World Port Sustainability Program was established on May 12, 2017, and is managed by the International Association of Ports and Harbors. If we go to clause 7, 2 of the bill, again, it sets out, it outlines the short and medium-term and long-term sustainability goals for the seaport industry. It talks about the enhancing the economic and social and cultural value of the seaport industry, and it speaks to the promotion and adoption of measures to protect the marine environment and surrounding atmosphere from seaport industry activities. I indicated earlier that the bill, of course, supports the whole issue of climate resilience, energy efficiency, the creation of a circular economy, the attainment of carbon neutral status in line with global climate targets, and of course, we can look at the deployment of green growth strategies and innovations in the seaport industry. And I will not continue to read all of them, but I'm sure members would have read the section at clause 7.3, which speaks to the National Seaport Sustainability Program. In relation to clauses 7.4, of course, we have a number of actions to be complied with. This section obviously elaborates that the division will also lead administration and management of all the regulatory sustainable and related affairs that are necessary. If we go to part 4, clauses 14, pages 26 to 38, you will note that the bill sets out the regime for the issuance and regulation of licenses, permits, and other instruments issued by the Barbados Port Inc. as part of its operations for activities under the Seaport bill. As previously mentioned, seaports have a shared responsibility in respect of the regulations of maritime affairs, obviously permits and other licenses and other instruments that have to be issued, and therefore it's necessary that we have very strong compliance, enforcement, and effective regulation of activities within the Seaport Bill. Part 5, clauses 30 to 32 of the bill promotes seaport-oriented research. Clause 30 sets out that there has to be established a national seaport industry research and development program for Barbados, and of course for Barbados to attain continued success from its seaport industry. Industry-specific research for development activities is critical, and as seaports are valuable to the global economy and to the national economy, research is also an extremely vital component to the continuously improving of the industry. Clause 31 obviously sets out the establishment of a Seaport Research and Development Committee tasked with developing and implementing national seaport industry research program. And at clause 32, it sets out the functions of the committee, which are to assist in developing and implementing national seaport policy and planning activities, coordinating programs and sub-programs, and ensuring the avoidance of duplication of activities across and sub-programs across the Port Inc. administration and other ocean-focused activities. It speaks to coordinating, very importantly, public and private partnerships and collaboration in executing the bill. It also speaks to identifying opportunities for joint research and development programs and development of economies of scale between seaport development technologies and other seaport programs that would certainly enhance the port's operation. If we go to page 41, part 6 of the bill, which speaks to clauses 33 to 38, it sets out the various kinds of arrangements for the Barbados Port Inc. May enter in respect of advancing Barbados' seaport industry and to promote strategic partnerships via arrangements. Clause 33, it speaks to Barbados providing for, it speaks for sister and friendship port arrangements. A sister port arrangement, obviously, or agreement, as noted in the bill, is really a cooperative arrangement between governments. Sister arrangements allow governments to share best practices and other information in respect of seaport management, operations, and of course, development, and consider obviously elements of research. It would therefore provide for the sharing of information in respect of research. Clauses 34 and 35 on page 42 deals with home porting. Home porting, as we all are uniquely aware of, is that that's the business of a cruise ship, loading passengers, supplies, fuel at the seaport, and of course returning to the seaport for the disembarkation of passengers at the end of the voyage. This is where a cruise ship, as we call it in Barbados, home ports, is also referred to as an embarkation or as well as to a turnaround port. Of course, I don't have to lecture the Chamber on matters relating to the critical importance of home porting and the associated benefits, economic benefits, but I will speak to that a bit later. But suffice to say that as we build out a seaport industry bill, it is important that we have within the bill contain arrangements for home porting. It also sets out clause 35(1)(a), which requires home porting vessels to comply with applicable national and international laws on safety, on matters of security, protection of the marine environment, and of course maritime labor when the ship is in Barbados. So effectively what we're saying here, that there are certain obligations that cruise ships who are imported in Barbados will have to follow, including the international standard international standard in terms of training, which I'm sure the Honourable Member for St. Peter's Minister of Labour is uniquely aware of, and of course the training, which is the SWC, which is the acronym for International Convention of Standards and Training. That obviously will be applicable in Barbados, and like I indicated, once the ships are in Barbados, they have a duty to follow international law, be it international labor law or IMO requirements. Clause 35, because we are promoting capacity building in respect of home porting activities, we will also ensure that the vessels have an opportunity to facilitate direct training, also engage in partnerships with local institutions to do so. And I would have told this chamber before that, for example, the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute would have developed programs, and I'm pleased to say that only probably less than 6 weeks ago, I had an opportunity again to speak to those persons who were involved in the program. We're making great progress. The port has also continued their duty, say civic responsibility as you may call it, and ensuring that these young persons are given internships at the port to further build out their skills and knowledge. And I can tell you that there's also the engagement of such trained persons at the Barbados Port Inc. Of course, we are not only seeking to train and develop persons in Barbados only for jobs here, but it's also an opportunity where persons can be trained and developed to take on jobs elsewhere. So we will continue with that clause, with that training. Clause 36 also speaks to the whole issue of promoting provisioning arrangements. Of course, this is very important to the sector. We are acutely aware that the cruise ships, when they come to Barbados, they will have to have supplies from time to time. Oftentimes they buy some supplies, but a large part of the supplies would obviously be shipped into Barbados. And what we're doing, obviously, is that we are putting in this bill opportunities for a framework to promote the provisioning arrangements that exist. Of course, once the ships are here, they have to supply fuel. They have to obviously ensure that they have enough water, and they buy water from the Bridgetown port. They obviously have to ensure that they have adequate food and beverage for all the customers. And therefore, by fostering this arrangement, It would allow us to continue to build out. I must inform the chamber that we are currently working on a policy paper in respect of linkages within the cruise sector, bringing agriculture, manufacturing, commerce, and all others to the table to have a full discussion. We have had a number of stakeholder engagements already. That paper will shortly be submitted to the cabinet for their consideration. But what is important for us is to ensure that we have the appropriate linkages. And by having the linkages necessary to build out the provisioning capacity in Barbados, it will allow not only Barbadian businesses to generate business from Barbados, but it will also help us in terms of creating economic opportunities and other job creation from this sector. So we will be working very closely with all our stakeholders as we seek to build out this arrangement. It could prove to be a very financially and highly rewarding sector for us within the tourism area, and therefore we are going to continue to work on that. And I will obviously inform the House at a later date of our progress with respect to the linkages sector and the huge benefit potential associated with the cruise ship industry, especially those who have to not only home on port, but those who come through Barbados for a visit, that they can buy even more goods from Barbados. Mr. Speaker, Part 7, clauses 39 to 46, the bill sets out a framework that will enable, and that's on page 44 of the bill, which would enable Barbados to become a leading transshipment hub. Of course, a seaport transshipment hub is a port that transfers cargo from one ship to another before it reaches its final destination. We all know about that. But transshipment hubs are important for the global supply shipping network because they connect different shipping systems. Of course, this is also vital for us as a country because it connects diversified shipping systems. It also is critical to the success of functioning within the global container shipping network. It also, in terms of reliability and resilience, and also it provides a very viable solution when there are no direct shipping routes. And I might add that a key reason for using transshipment hubs, or I should say transshipment hubs, are to improve the overall efficiency, of course, the geographical coverage within the maritime sector. And this is something that is very critical, and I'll elaborate a bit later why I made this point, especially this key point, because as we see the rerouting of shipping lanes, it is important that Barbados positions itself to take advantage of those opportunities whenever they're presented. Of course, at clause 39 of the bill, it speaks to the Barbados Transshipment and Port-Centric Logistics Program. Of course, this will be put in place, but through this program, we believe that we will have the enabling conditions necessary for Barbados to become a transshipment hub. And of course, once that is created, and how to maintain it, the standards for improving maritime trade coordination and efficiency in relation to the supply chain, a strategic plan, as noted, which will be outlined for Barbados to efficiently and effectively and continuously meet the ever-changing demands of logistics services, actions or initiatives to ensure continued economic or other forms of development and benefits from transshipment and port-centric logistics activities. Efforts made will obviously made to integrate the multimodal transport activities in furtherance of the objectives of the Merchant Shipping Multimodal Transport Act, which was debated in this Honourable Chamber last year, which predominantly is to support and promote maritime connected multimodal transport, as well as efforts made to implement Section 15 of the Merchant Shipping Multimodal Transport Act 2024. Of course, shipping and logistics connect producers, we all know this, and consumers of goods. It is also overcoming the geographical distance and other logistical challenges. It influences everything we do, Mr. Speaker, from production costs to product availability, impacting businesses and consumers alike. And moreover, advancements in technology and automation are constantly transforming the landscape, optimizing processes, and driving further efficiencies. So, shipping and logistics, clearly, are the lifeblood of global trade. It's about shaping the economy. It's about ensuring that we have a almost seamless flow of goods that fuels commerce and growth. And of course, with multimodal transport being a fundamental pillar of the logistics, it is therefore offered an approach, an integrated approach, might I add, to the movement of goods. And therefore, I don't think that anybody in Barbados would not want to see us have a transshipment hub in Barbados. Clause 8 of the bill, Part 8 of the bill, clauses 47 to 50, it outlines a clear procedure for the seaport pre-clearances. Of course, pre-clearance will allow travelers to clear customs, immigration, and agriculture inspections in Barbados before traveling from Barbados to a foreign port. And of course, the bill also addresses this matter based on reciprocity, detailing arrangements between the government of Barbados and other states, where those countries who obviously would have pre-clearance arrangements with us would be able to allow cargo to be pre-cleared. The effect of pre-clearance is that passengers and cargo from Barbados can clear inspection relating to customs, immigration, agriculture, and Clause 50, like I said, provides for reciprocity. The issue relating to pre-clearance in terms of the benefits, there are a number of benefits. Of course, it enhances the traveler's safety and security. What it also does, and what we're really focused on, is of course trying to avoid delays within the port system, avoiding lengthy inspections upon arrival in destination of the country. Because if you have your officers in a destination doing what they're required to do, then obviously we will have a reduction in the time that would not otherwise been associated with the delays in respect of the movement of cargo. Of course, we will be facilitating and expediting the movement of persons and cargo in furtherance of the facilitation of the International Maritime Traffic Act, the file that we would have brought here last year. At Part 9, clauses 51 to 54 of the bill, it outlines the procedures to be followed in respect of unclaimed goods and unpaid fees that are payable in respect of goods that are in possession at the Barbados port. Unclaimed goods, also known as abandoned cargo, also refers to where they have not been collected by the consignee or the importer. And such abandoned cargo may be reclaimed by the shipper, sold by auction, or destroyed, especially if it is perishable or hazardous cargo. Part 10, clauses 55 to 65 of the bill pertains to trade in ocean minerals, precious minerals sourced from the sea. It is important. You recall that, again, last year, we would have enacted the Maritime Underwater Heritage Act, which was proclaimed this year in 2025, which outlines, of course, the international line regime for prospecting, exploration, of course, and mining of materials, especially from Barbados' waters, and under Barbados' sponsorship of the United Nations Law on the Sea conventions. Part 10 also is concerned with when such materials and precious metals have been retrieved from the sea and are brought to shore to be eventually traded. It also has a section which, within that Part 10, which also speaks to the responsible supply chain management of minerals and precious metals. It's provided for a framework to be followed based on the international standards and best practices recommended by the United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Research Institute, which has done extensive research in this area. Barbados as Barbados begins to explore and diversify its maritime sector beyond the traditional maritime activities such as shipping and fisheries to other sectors, it is important that we have built in within the Seaport Bill the necessary regulations to ensure that such deep sea mining complies with all of the required international standards, and that is what this bill has also set out to do. Clause 57, it outlines ocean minerals and precious metals, the documentation, the fingerprinting, yes, Mr. Speaker, fingerprinting, and clearance procedures, which includes submission of an ocean minerals and precious metals declaration form through the maritime single window by the owner, agent, vessel master, or licensee in respect of whom the minerals and precious metals are concerned. The fifth schedule to the bill also sets out the ocean minerals and precious metals. Clause 58, the recognition also makes provision for the enabling framework for responsive supply chain management of ocean minerals and precious metals, and requires the development of a more specific regulatory instrument, namely the Barbados Ocean Minerals and Precious Metals Supply Chain Management Code. And the code at Clause 58 expresses what has to be done in respect of this matter. I may also add, Mr. Speaker, the Maritime, Underwater and Heritage Act, obviously working with the ministry responsible for natural resources in collaboration with the Barbados Maritime Transport Administration, will have duties within responsibilities within this section. With respect to that, the overarching objective of the code, as I said, it shall be the adoption of due diligence measures to ensure responsible and sustainable supply chains of materials and precious metals that is sourced and recovered from the sea. Of course, we have to be ever mindful, Mr. Speaker, because as you go beyond the traditional form of shipping and fisheries in terms of maritime affairs, and you go into resources and other minerals from the ocean bed, it is important that we have a very clearly defined framework embedded in the law, but also respecting the fact that Barbados is signatory to the International Maritime Organization, and that we will also have to conform with other organizations. In particular, we're going to have to ensure that the reference frameworks follow the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, the Chinese Due Diligence Guidelines for Responsible Mineral Supply Chains, the Protocol Against Illegal Exploitation of Natural Resources, the International Conference at the Great Lakes Region in Mineral Tracking and Certification Systems, and that is why it's important to have these disclosures and also have the fingerprinting and the documentation. In addition to that, we also have the German Federal Institute for Geoscience and Natural Resources and any other relevant framework, Mr. Speaker, that we have to follow to ensure that there is ethical movement in this area. Clause 59, it also makes, because obviously persons might be vested, and perhaps to say that with respect to smaller groups or individuals, that they wouldn't be seeing anything for them. But Clause 59 promotes the inclusion of individual groups and small businesses, including members of local coastal and fishing communities in ocean minerals and precious metals training activities. In other words, they are persons who are within the small business category who also reserve the right to do so. And we have, obviously, and they can do so within the enabling legislation. And obviously, at Clause 59.3, you will note that it requires the Artisanal and Small-Scale Sea Miners Association to be participants in the supply chain. In other words, we're not excluding small business persons or other members of the fishing community and others who are involved in this business from it. And that is set out very clearly at Clause 59.3 of the bill as part of the supply chain certification requirements. Mr. Speaker, at clauses 60 to 61, there are additional standards of reference for the Artisanal and Small-Scale Sea Miners Association that is embedded in there. And of course, we will have the necessary education and sessions and information sessions to make sure that we inform those small-scale sea miners so that they too would understand how they could benefit from this legislation. So this legislation is not only for what people may consider for corporate entities involved in the maritime sector. This provision, as we have done consistently in other bills relating to maritime affairs, they would have obviously a very critical role, but also a role that they can participate in this activity. Clause 63, it enables owners and operators of small vessels registered under the Shipping Domestics Vessels Act that we brought here last year to provide support and other services to vessels engaged in ocean mineral activities. Clause 64 on page 60 of the bill, it speaks to the allocation of a percentage of ocean minerals and precious metals covered from sea to support. It talks about the green transition of shipping under the Emissions Control Act that we would have passed in this chamber last year. It also speaks to other transport sectors for renewable industry-reliant minerals. As I would have explained when I debated back in December 10th, I think it was last year, when we dealt with the Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill, we would have set out a clear framework for the greening of the maritime transport sector and transitioning the energy to a more efficient transport, including maritime transport, which would obviously necessitate technology such as batteries. These batteries rely on minerals, of course, and therefore, if these batteries rely on precious metals, it's important that we ensure we have the framework within the bill, and we have done so at clause 64. Clause 65 further enhances the protection and management of maritime heritage in respect of the forms of natural heritage at the border. Of course, we are going to continue to adopt the best practices from institutions, and in this respect, the best practices that we will be adopting will be those from the World Customs Organization Cultural Heritage Program and tailored to meet our requirements here in Barbados to the extent we are practical with respect to natural heritage. Clause Part 11, clauses 66 to 70 of the bill. It sets out it outlines the regulatory oversight powers of administration, that is the Barbados Maritime Transport Administration, formerly the Shipping Division. Clauses 68 to 69 outlines the regulatory activities within the purview of Barbados Port Inc. Clauses 71 to 73, Part 12 of the bill concerns offenses and penalties under the legislation. And I know that, of course, honorable members will be acutely aware that with most pieces of legislation, it is important that you have offenses and penalties embedded. Of course, we are going to ensure this, especially when it comes to deep sea mining and so on, that we have the appropriate offenses because we have to ensure we protect Barbados' territorial waters. Clauses 74 to 94, the bill provisions. Collectively, these provisions support the overarching framework for an economically viable and ecologically sustainable and socially and culturally responsive seaport industry for Barbados. And of course, some of the key highlights within section part 13 of the miscellaneous provisions will, of course, ensuring that seafarers have access to port welfare services. There's at clause 75 of the bill. The establishment of a seaport industry fund at clause 76. Cruise passenger contributions to sustainability as found at clause 77. The seaport industry investment schemes at clauses 78 all the way through to 83 of the bill. I may also add, Mr. Speaker, that at clause 94, this is very important, because we'll be moving amendment clause 94. There will be an amendment which will speak to the fact that the minister may by order amend schedules to the act. At the moment, as is noted on page 76 of the bill, it says the minister may by order amend the second and third schedules to the act of and regulations made of that. So we're going to make an amendment to note clause 74 that the minister may by order amend schedules to the act. And that will be the amendment, and of course I'll move that amendment in committee, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also think that it is my duty, and I indicated earlier in my opening remarks, that I should give an update on the number of issues associated with shipping and of course maritime. Of course, let me start by indicating to members of the chamber that there is a Barbados ship registry, Barbados Maritime Ships Registry that is located in the United Kingdom out of the British High Commission's office, right? And that organization is set up, I believe, going way back to way back. I don't want to mislead the House and give the exact year, but what I would like to inform the chamber is that this organization has responsibility for port state responsibility, including the state flags, that is the Barbados flag, being flown on ships as they traverse international waters. And of course, we are uniquely aware that from time to time, they may have issues related to vessels that are registered within a jurisdiction. But I want to make the point that the Barbados Maritime Ship Registry does not register any vessels under the Barbados flag, that are sanctioned by the United States, United Kingdom, or Europe, or any other nation for that matter. There is an assessment process for registration. The Barbados Maritime Ship Registry diligently investigates whether any sanctions are imposed against a vessel. In this respect, a vessel subsequently registered or already registered under the Barbados flag becomes sanctioned. The Barbados Maritime Shipping Registry digital portal provides a direct link to other sanctioned websites, and such vessels are promptly deleted from the Barbados International Ships Registrar. Now, it is important that we do so, but I also take the time to explain this because the Barbados Maritime Ship Registry operates in compliance with Section 160 of the Merchant Shipping Act that we passed last year, which expressly prohibits registration practices that can bring the Barbados flag into disrepute. And the ministry can attest to this by using the registry, the ship registry. We make a conscious effort through its due diligence measures and compliance to ensure that any directives issued by the ministry to protect Barbados's international reputation. And therefore, it has to be noted that sanctioned vessels are typically based on intelligence from national secret services rather than from the ship's registries. This means that the ship's registry ability to anticipate sanctions can be affected when information is not shared. But that the ship registry has also verified that all vessels registered under the Barbados flag are fully compliant with the International Maritime Organization conventions, and the ship registry also ensures that through vessel surveys and other directives and legislation, of course on behalf of the government of Barbados, that such vessels are aligned with international maritime safety, security, and marine, environmental, and maritime labor standards. So and let me caution here that the Barbados Maritime Ship Registry is not about making money by registering fast and furiously at all, as some people might want to claim. This is a very robust organization that ensures that it complies, as I indicated, with the International Maritime Organization, and that obviously through proper due diligence that we take the appropriate actions. And I may add, Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of all, that the Barbados Ships Registry globally ranks in the top 30 largest registries worldwide and the third largest in the Caribbean with gross tonnage exceeding 9.5 million. So I just want the House to be aware for the information that there's a process, because from time to time you will have situations coming up where the government obviously would have to remove a Barbados flag from a vessel, and we do so recognizing that there are several action steps that we take, including proper due diligence. And of course, I would have indicated some time ago when I led legislation that this is something that we will continue to monitor, and that is why we are strengthening a lot of our legislation as it relates to maritime affairs. And again, today, we're doing a similar thing. With respect to the port, I wish to bring members up to speed on a number of issues. For example, the port was faced with a situation over the last, say, 2 weeks, where the ships were going to impose a congestion fee. They had recommended that a $250 US fee for a 20-foot container, a $500 US fee for a 40-foot container. But I must commend the port, and particularly the port's management. They successfully fought against the implementation of this fee. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that fee, and we have correspondence from the shippers confirming that fee will no longer be applicable. We've implemented, and we fought back, and we informed them that we're implementing priority berthing policies, whereby weekly scheduled cargo lines are given the guarantee of berthing times and berthing time slots. We are also guaranteeing the minimum productivity rates. Of course, we're offloading 20 containers per hour, and of course, we're also standardizing the marine charges. Mr. Speaker, berth 6, you would have heard me in the Honourable Chairman speaking to berth 6 in the past. The reason why berth 6 was contemplated is to ease congestion in the Bridgetown port. We have a situation, it's well known to all, that cargo and cruise ships compete for berthing space. And as a result of all the activities, initiatives that I've undertaken in my other part of the ministry in tourism, we are out there working hard to bring even more cruise ships to Barbados. And therefore, with the increased calls at the Bridgetown port, we are obviously faced with a situation where we have some congestion. Happily, I'm pleased to tell you that berth 6 will be completed this year. I'm anticipating no later than August, September, that we will have berth 6 completed. We have, like I said, the situation with the congestion. I would have already informed the House when we had the budget debate that in 2023, we had, calendar year 2023, we had 374 vessels calling here at the port with almost 662,000 passengers. In 2024, calendar year 2024, we had 433 calls and over 761,000 passengers coming into Barbados. And in this year alone, we are projecting that we will have even more cruise ships calling at the Bridgetown port, 463 ships with almost, with more than 50,000 at today's date, of course, passengers coming into Barbados. We are working, of course, you will note, Mr. Speaker, and the Honourable Member St. Peter will be very pleased to know, because he personally visited the area at Spikestown, the berth that we have using the tender arrangement, where smaller luxury cruise ships and yachts, as they refer to them, would want to come into Barbados. Sometimes they don't want to go into the Bridgetown port, and there is substantial interest in berthing at Spikestown. Thus far for the year, we've had at least 2 luxury cruise ships berthing in that area. Of course, we will continue to build out additional opportunities, and obviously the area will be further enhanced to ensure that the sharing of benefits within the community. So you can blame me, Mr. Speaker, for the congestion at the port, because were it not for me going out there working hard on behalf of Barbados to get more cruise ships and passengers to Barbados. So if I wasn't doing my job on one hand, then I could be crucified and probably dismissed from the cabinet for non-performance. But because I have, along with members of my team, been performing and driving more business to Barbados, we've created a problem with the congestion. But what I will also say is that the port, they are reclaiming 9.4 acres for Berth 6, and that is a welcome initiative, because what that will do, like I said, it will help us to ease with the port congestion, and of course ensure that we have equally important cargo ships coming to Barbados, as well, of course, the cargo ships. And that project, as I indicated to the Parliament before, would be in excess of, I think it's approximately $100 million. Of course, we have to expand the port. The Bridgetown Port, they have identified a number of spaces within the vicinity, or lands, I should say, within the vicinity of the port. The House must be made aware that the area known as the Kensington Mall, or the massive building as some people refer to it, that the port acquired approximately 1.5 acres along with property. That was acquired for just over, well, I'm not going to give the figures because I have to clear it with the port, but I know I should be disclosing the port's information. Not that disrespectful to the port, but I'm not sure if there are any clauses, but I can tell you that we have acquired it, and I will clear that in my rapid remarks. I will come back to it and let you know what we've done there. We've also, Lot 13, which is behind Cube Blue, we've acquired that 1.5 acres. Again, it's additional storage space for cargo, for cars, and for containers. Because, Mr. Speaker, you will realize that if you go into the port on any given day, you will see the number of containers that we have there. You will see trucks lining outside the port. You will see that there's a lot of congestion. It therefore means that there's a lot of economic activity in Barbados. It's not only cargo in terms of food stuff and so on, but other materials obviously coming in that we don't manufacture here, coming into Barbados with all the development taking place. And therefore, we have to ensure that we do not bottleneck cargo being discharged from the port. There's also what we refer to as the virtual expansion in terms of extended hours. Already we have a 24-hour system in place where the ships, for ship operations, we are working obviously with the unions to ensure that we move to a full 24 operation for the administrative component, to ensure that we can even move cargo from within the port with almost seamlessly and with as many delays being discontinued, because that is something that we have to work on. With respect to the bulk facility, we will recall in January of this year, there was a major sea swell in that location. What had happened while a ship was offloading some grain, it violently struck the berth, it undermined the facility, and obviously rendering it unsafe for vehicular operation. Must tell the House that the bulk facility was built in 1969, and obviously the repair work that must be undertaken in that area to ensure that we maintain it will cost the government $16 million. It's a major repairs project, and as you're well aware, anything remotely connected to marine construction doesn't cost a few cents. It does cost a lot of money, costs a lot of money, and therefore, obviously, they have followed all the tendering processes to ensure that we can conclude that. So the repairs will cost us $16 million here. I had the opportunity, once we had this situation, to meet with all the importers, and we arranged the berthing schedules to allow for the orderly discharge of bulk items. Of course, it will be a rolling schedule, and we will continue in respect of that. Obviously, we will continue to discharge grain as we continue to do from that general area via the conveyor belt. And of course, the sand and other aggregate materials will be discharged via barge. And in exceptional situations, we will have to go into the deep water harbor itself, but of course we will ensure that we comply with all of the health and all the necessary regulations to ensure that we don't compromise health and safety, particularly of the workers in that area. And we will continue to ensure that the strict compliance with health and safety standards are adhered to. Mr. Speaker, I should also inform the House that we have plans to build an aggregate berth. We cannot continue with something that was built many years ago. It's too small. There's a lot of demand for cargo, and this is something not that the government wants to be going out there and spending money. It is a direct result of the business and the economic activity happening in Barbados, and therefore this project will be announced at a later date. But we are currently in the stage of planning with respect to the aggregate berth that we intend to construct there at the Bridgetown Port. Mr. Speaker, I think it's also appropriate at this point in time as well that I inform the House of some other measures that the Bridgetown Port would have taken, and government being the sole shareholder in Bridgetown Port would have undertaken. I think it's fair to say that 2 years ago, the port introduced a free-out port. That is where all the port charges were applied locally as opposed to applying them to the shipping lines. That was implemented with the associated benefits that I will speak to. The port also took over the stevedoring from the private sector, allowing us again as a government to reduce the cost and have more transparent pricing. Those two initiatives, Mr. Speaker, would have reduced costs to the shipping lines and freight charges, which also reduced the cost to the consumer. When you look at the fact that there was a further reduction of 7.5% on port charges, which was implemented last year to ease the cost of living. These measures collectively have yielded more than 17.5% reduction in port charges, and of course an overall cost reduction of approximately $10 million. And of course, there are other factors that we have to take into consideration. Even though we reduce port charges, we don't have any control over fuel costs and other shipping costs, and therefore we will continue as a responsible government to do what we have to do to ensure that we have cost of living reduction initiatives in place to help protect or shield, I should say, the Barbadian public from increased costs. Mr. Speaker, I may also let you know, and those of you who pass by the port, you will see that there is a ship, cargo ship there, and they have two huge gantry cranes there. There are two new state-of-the-art electronic cranes. They're very expensive, Mr. Speaker. The port would have invested over $66 million in a range of equipment there, including those two state-of-the-art cranes. They're not cheap, but what is important that we recognize that we have to have equipment at the Bridgetown Port, particularly with berth 6 coming on stream in a matter of months, to help us with the efficiency and respect of cargo operations. And these two new cranes will go a long way in ensuring that we create a more efficient port. I might also add, Mr. Speaker, that from early as March of this year, I've been having weekly meetings with all stakeholders associated with the port. The last stakeholders we added were the truckers, and we've added them only last week. Of course, the goal is to ensure that we can move all cargo out of the port within 48 hours, with the eventual goal of doing so within 24 hours. We have made considerable progress, Mr. Speaker, in this respect, and we are anticipating that we will accomplish this goal. What we've done is, like I said, we brought together all the stakeholders. They meet with me at my office, from the customs brokers, the customs leadership, the plant quarantine, the Ministry of Health, the port health officials, veterinary services, immigration, all of them, Mr. Speaker. We bring them together, and we have that very transparent conversation, and that is going well. Of course, training electronic single window, the Barbados electronic single window, which the Ministry of Commerce is currently leading. They are mandated to complete that training by May 1st of this year. Of course, we will continue to do what we have to do with respect of all the below activities that must be undertaken at the port. Mr. Speaker, there are also some other highlights that I want to mention. In addition to the Barbados electronic single window, we also have the maritime single window. That was implemented, implemented by March 31st today. All the training was completed. We have also completed training with respect to the customs, immigration, the commerce, the port health officers, the plant quarantine, the shipping agents as well, and veterinary services. So we have done that training. We were given them a mandate to complete the training by today, March 31st, for the effective for the effective implementation of March 31st. That has been done. That I've been advised was completed. And again, Mr. Speaker, we're doing this because we want to reduce delays in clearing vessels within the Bridgetown port. And of course, the Assecuda system, there will be updates to that system, and of course, changes as necessary to ensure that we have a more consumer, more efficient, friendly, more efficient system being aligned. I also want to inform the House that we are also focusing within the port on a waste-to-energy program. Again, it's going to be a state-of-the-art energy efficient facility. This is necessary. We have a number of requirements, not only from IMO, but also in respect of climate change. We're currently burning waste at that site, and therefore we are moving to have a very modern waste-to-energy plant at the Bridgetown port. Mr. Speaker, there are a couple warning signs, and I think it's absolutely necessary that I raise them. Yes, we are doing all we have to do in terms of port efficiency and ensuring that we meet our objectives. But beyond that, we also have to be monitoring the geopolitical situation that's happening globally. I will have said this in the budget speech as well as it relates to tourism. But I'm also going to make the point here today that we have to monitor it because we have potential port charges which could be implemented by another countries on all Chinese-built ships. Of course, I'm aware that there are lobbying efforts, including on the part of our Prime Minister, who's also chairman of CARICOM, and also other shipping executives who are making, obviously, presentations to ensure that this does not impact us. What we've seen and what we've been reading, and what I have had the opportunity when speaking to some people involved in the shipping industry, and the port is also very close to those persons, that if this goes through, you could have potentially US $1,500 charge per 20-foot container, and a $1,500 US charge on a 20-foot container. And when we start to do the numbers, this could equal to about maybe another 40 to 50% increase in freight charges. And therefore, it cannot be sustainable. We have to do everything possible to ensure that we at least utilize every ounce of lobbying power, that we monitor the situation, because this could have consequences for cost of living. Of course, there are other measures that I'm not going to disclose yet in terms of us trying to, in terms of lobbying efforts, but we really have to, and what the port is doing, I believe that for the port to speak to the country, but we have to be mindful of what is ahead of us. Like I said, the port successfully fought off the congestion fee. That would have been resulted in significant charges, and therefore we don't have to worry with that, but we have to worry about what's happening within our geopolitical space, as this could create some additional challenges for us. Mr. Speaker, I give you the assurance, and I give the country the assurance that they can expect further explanations regarding the ongoing improvements, not only the port, but also any issues that have any issues that would have the potential to impact on Barbados's shipping and freighting costs. I want, as I've always done, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Permanent Secretary within the Ministry of International Transport, who is here. I didn't ask your permission to call his name, so I can't do so, Mr. Speaker. I forgot. Unless you grant me permission to do so now, But if you rule that I can't, then I shall obey as
You may so do, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize for not giving you requisite notice. But I believe it's important that when you have public officers who work as hard as they have been working, that you recognize them, because the public needs to hear this. And I want to recognize the Permanent Secretary within the Ministry of Transport, Mr. Charlie Brown, the Chief Technical Officer, who's also here with us. Mr. Brown is here along with the Chief Technical Officer, Dion Gibbs-Nichols, who's here, as well as the Director of the Maritime Affairs, Ms. Najla King, who's also here and who has done a tremendous amount of work with her team, and yes, the Chief Technical Officer and the Permanent Secretary in helping us, and of course the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, to bring a number of bills relating to maritime affairs to this chamber. I also wish to thank the Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Port Inc., Mr. David Jean-Marie, who's here in the chamber with us, as you can see, the other directors of the management, of course, and staff at the Barbados Port Inc. for everything that they continue to do to help us, and I will also thank all stakeholders who we reach out to in respect of helping us to further the maritime affairs sector in Barbados. Let me also thank the Honourable Attorney General, Member of Parliament for St. Joseph, and his staff at the CPC office for this 89-page document. I know that we have been bringing a lot of bills to this Parliament, some that exceed 1,000 pages, but it is necessary as we continue to further build out the maritime sector. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am obliged, and obviously I beg that this bill be read a second time.
Honourable Member Christchurch. So,
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll probably try to speak softly so I don't wake those who are in slumber. But I won't identify them, except that I'll say that I normally enjoy the occasions when this Honourable Minister brings legislation here. Unlike some of his colleagues, I always find it very exciting. And I enjoy the exchanges, the debate. I enjoy the fact that he approaches his legislation with much sobriety. And if I raise matters of concern, he displays a quality of maturity in which he is always willing to go away, look at the constructive criticism, and come back. And so, in spite of the obvious disinterest among his colleagues, I will try not to shout for fear that I may wake them. The Honourable Minister has boasted that this is his 10th piece of legislation, and I assure him that I have enjoyed the previous 9, and my mood and attitude today will be the same as it was then. Excitement that this ministry, and indeed this department of the ministry, brings a certain industriousness to parliamentary life. One never does disturbance to legislation that clearly follows international obligations, except that as a sovereign parliament, we will reserve the right to question things, and I want to do so today. I want to draw the Honourable Minister's attention to Section 71, and this is going to be legalistic. And there is no shortage of lawyers in this Parliament. Yes, there are a few. I know one is taking measurements for the curtains at the Barbados High Commission in London, so that may explain why he is not part of today's quorum. But even in his absence, I will bring the Honourable Minister to Section 71, subsection 1, and we wish him well. A few months ago, he was measuring for your office, and he was disappointed. Yes, Section 71(1), and the Honourable Minister may be assured that this is constructive, not come here to tear any legislation apart. Let us see this as a joint effort in completing this good and necessary work. This is under the rubric offences and penalties, and for the sake of the bill, it speaks of arrest of ship for unpaid charges. Obviously, that is not going to appear in the legislation when it becomes an act. Your Honor, you are a lawyer and a good one. You traverse the criminal as well as the civil, and you are familiar with Moreva injunctions. And so in bringing you to this, I will say to you that this is akin to a Moreva injunction. But it is different in that it relates particularly to the port, which is our concern here. Let me read it, sir. Where any harbor charges or fees are owing and remain unpaid for a period of 1 month or more in respect of a ship, an authorized employee may arrest the ship and its tackle, apparel, and furniture, and it may detain it until the amount of the charges or fees is paid. And Your Honor, that is reminiscent of that Moreva injunction where a creditor has the right to go to a court and ask the court to enjoin that ship against departure so that he may pursue his legal rights against the ship owner, or indeed against the ship. So that this section reads similarly to that injunction, but it is particular. It is not precisely of the nature of the injunction. But I want to bring, through you, sir, Clause 71(1), I want to bring the minister's attention to the second line, which says, an authorized employee. Since it is that authorized employee who may, I think, bring the action. Yes. Now, it may seem simple, but it is not, because we come to the question of who is a proper litigant. It says an authorized employee may arrest the ship. Now that is a substantial power. And being so substantial, the legislation may wish to identify this authorized employee. Now, admittedly, Your Honor, I came here this morning after the government managed to put together its quorum. Congratulations to the government in managing to put together that quorum. And I have come here and I've read the legislation for the first time, and perhaps that is my fault. But there's no quarrel generally with the legislation. I just want to bring the minister's attention to that section 71, clause, I'm told I should call it, clause 71, subclause 1, which gives an authorized employee that great power to arrest a ship. There are several employees down there. Now, my own humble suggestion is that the legislation may wish to define who is an authorized employee. These things seem simple, but you know, sir, parties have been non-suited because they do not have the correct party. And one of the first things you do when you go to court, you always ensure that you have the correct party. And the court itself ensures that the correct party is before the court. Now, Port Authority, I believe, has quite a number of employees. I don't know how many, but this legislation is speaking to an authorized employee. And while the legislation speaks to the concept of authorized employee, the legislation may wish to identify that person. It can do that in the clause 2, and I want to give free legal advice to the minister that when you are trying to identify a party legislatively, you can go to clause 2. Sometimes it's clause 2, sometimes it's clause 3, but that's called the definition section, and it is right there, definitions. And the draftsman may wish to have that person defined there, who is an authorized employee. Now, we can presume that it would be the chief executive officer, or deputy chief executive officer, or the, the corporate secretary, or even the chairman of the board. But courts do not like people to presume nor even assume, especially when it is governed by legislation, and the court will not depart from it within the 4 walls of that legislation, and therefore the court itself will ask, who is an authorized employee? Who is this man before me calling himself an authorized employee with this large duty of arresting a ship? It is not a scooter that the police used to grab and put in the back of the Land Rover. This is a ship. So that the legislation may wish to identify that person for clarity, and not only clarity, but for certainty. So my own humble suggestion is that, Minister, through you, sir, that you revisit this legislation. I know you have lavish praise on the draftsman and indeed the Honourable Member for St. Joseph. But do consider that amendment, and if you don't wish to place that amendment at clause 2, I don't know if it is there. I'm seeing the legislation for the first time. I have not myself seen authorized employee defined at section 2, and if there's no need to place it there, you can place it at part 12. Can go there. Or you can embarrass me and say, look, it is already there. And if it is already there, I won't be embarrassed. I would be relieved that this legislation is not deficient in that regard. But that is a deficiency that appears in the legislation, and I use the word appears, so that if I'm to be embarrassed hereafter, I accept that I have not read the entire thing. But even having failed to read the entire thing, and I followed what the minister was saying, he was very, he expatiated in a manner that was quite admirable across the length and breadth of the legislation. But I've already praised him for coming here, and in spite of the disinterest among his colleagues, I praise him for bringing not only lots of legislation, but legislation which runs wide and deep, as we used to sing in Sunday school. So that authorized employee may be defined at clause 2, which will become section 2, or you can do it quite simply at the part 12, which appears offenses and penalties, and it can easily go in even as subclause 3, so that the authorized employee can be defined, so that when the arrest of the ship occurs, you have a party before the court who is not the watchman, because he is an employee too. But as I said, we're assuming it is the CEO, the deputy CEO, or the corporate secretary, or perhaps the chairman of the board. But the legislation is quite able to say that. So I would suggest that the legislation says that. If there's any confusion, this troubling question of authorization occurs at section 86 of the bill. And that is under the rubric of the bill, protection from personal liability. And the question of authorization occurs at D, clause 86, subclause D. It says, any member and officer or employee of the administration or such other person who is authorized in writing, acting under the direction of the minister or the administration. So that here's a section that zeroes in or homes in on this question of authorization. And in the context of clause 86D, authorization is designated, or authorization is given by the minister or the administration. Again, the administration would be the CEO and his executive members and perhaps the chairman. But that is within a different context. That is within the context of personal liability, where you're shielding certain parties from personal liability, so that does not resolve the dilemma that one has identified at clause 71, subclause 1. The question as to who is an authorized official, again, finds expression at clause 89, B1. And this is under the rubric confidentiality, the question of confidentiality. 89(1)B, Roman numeral 1. This is an injunction against disclosure of confidential information, that the person shall not disclose confidential information obtained as a result of his relationship with Barbados Port Inc. to any person other than to an authorized official. So that the question of authorization features there again, but it does not go as far as definition. And again, so that although the question of authorization arises in these clauses and subclauses, the matter of an authorized employee, or the definition of an authorized employee, still remains to be dealt with. So that sections 87, clauses 87, I beg your pardon, and 89 do not assist us any further. But, as I said, I'm willing to be embarrassed by someone pointing to the definition within the bill itself. Clause 92, again, same thing. Deals with the question of authorization. Let us go there. Clause 92(1). The chief executive officer, with the approval of the minister, may, where he considers it justifiable, authorize an entity or competent person outside of Barbados to perform specified regulatory oversight responsibilities on behalf of BPI under this act or under any other enactment in which there are specified functions in relation to Barbados Port Inc. So that we see that that does not pertain to the question of an authorized employee within a local context. That is delegation of functions of the port in relation to matters overseas. Again, the question as to the authorization and the question as to the definition of an authorized employee remains to be dealt with. So I come back to my original position that this is too important a matter. This is too important a definition, because we're given power, the legislation is giving power to a person to seize a ship. Something, as I said when I began, is akin to the Moreva injunction, and let the public of Barbados know that the citizen has the right to go to a court and to arrest a ship. He doesn't do the arrest himself, but the judge gives an order, and as big as the ship is, and as powerful as the captain may be, that ship may be detained, arrested by a judge acting on an application from any humble citizen of this country who is owed money, for example, or who is in some way interested in having that ship stay in Barbados, stay at the port, so that his judgment, so that his debts, the debts from that ship may be satisfied. This section is doing the same thing. This section is doing the same thing, except that it is not John's citizen. It is an authorized employee. And again, I think the legislation is duty-bound to identify, for the sake of absolute clarity in relation to a great power, a power to arrest a large ship, large or small, it is a great power. So let the legislation, please, Your Honor, identify that person so that there is absolutely no doubt as to whether it is the CEO. I may have no doubt it will be the CEO, the deputy CEO, I don't know the organization chart down there, or the corporate secretary, or someone of high authority, or the chairman of the board, someone of high authority, or someone delegated by the chairman of the board. But let that person under this legislation be clearly identified. And it is a small amendment that can be made, and if there is any merit in what I'm saying, it is a small amendment that will be made, since, as I've said, I always enjoy the engagement with this minister for his gravity, his seriousness, his maturity, his attention to legislation is admirable, and it is small wonder that this is the 10th occasion that he is here. And he is here because he is industrious. Of course, industriousness with legislation may not be one's ultimate salvation. If this legislation is keeping him out of St. Michael West Central, well, then he will not have my sympathy. We will take advantage of his absence from St. Michael West Central. So I will encourage him to come with more legislation. Keep him in here, keep him in here. Do not let him, we appeal to the Honourable Prime Minister, do not let him get into St. Michael West Central. Put him on to his 11th and 12th piece of legislation, and I hope it is very extensive. But he is due some congratulation, and I hope he will accept the criticism. It is short, but it is not slight. And he and I understand that term, short but not slight. I want to draw the Honourable Minister's attention, through you, sir, to the Section 65 of this bill. I move from that question of authorized person. Section 65 caught my attention, and it reads, protection of maritime, cultural, and natural heritage at the border. This question of heritage will not be a question that makes this government comfortable. In the aftermath, and not so much the aftermath, but it is the heat. There is the heat of public discussion on issues of heritage, and it is at Whole Town, it is on the East Coast that was designated a National Heritage Park, and it has moved to Bay Street and the Garrison, and I'm told it will reach Oistins. Now, Clause 65 of this legislation deals with matters of cultural and natural heritage, and I will bring the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central to Oistins. It says here, let me read it, please, sir. Barbados Port Inc., in consultation with relevant agencies and stakeholders, shall coordinate a plan of action for protection and management of maritime heritage at national borders, especially in relation to tangible forms of maritime, cultural, and natural heritage being imported into or exported out of Barbados. And Clause 2, Subclause 2, I beg your pardon, in furtherance of Subsection 1, guidance and best practice shall be adopted from the World Customs Organization Cultural Heritage Program and tailored to the extent practical to natural heritage. If I have been kind at the beginning of my presentation here this morning, that kindness will not extend on matters of cultural and natural heritage. The government has not been doing too well on matters of cultural and natural heritage. I've identified Whole Town. I have identified the geriatric hospital, beautiful heritage building, but we're supposed to be dealing in maritime, so I will not digress, sir. I am bringing this minister, this honorable minister, to Oistins. And just by way of information, if the honorable minister wants to, on behalf of the government, retrieve some of its reputation for attention to matters of heritage, there are, I think, still some cannons, old cannons in the sea at Oistins behind the police station. And we have looked on for some time with consternation at these cannons lying in the sea, semi-buried in the sand. If they were light enough, someone would lift them and take them to their house. They're extremely heavy. And they are items of maritime, cultural, and natural heritage. They need to be removed from the sea. I don't know if they used to sit, I believe so though. I don't know if they used to sit on the perch, on that escarpment that looks onto the Oistins Bay, perhaps. They used to sit there, or wherever they used to sit. I am giving notice to the honorable member for St. Michael West Central, under this act, to have those cannons removed from the sea where they presently perish as garbage, really. They look like garbage. They're certainly abandoned, but there is value. There is cultural and historic, certainly, value pertaining to those items. I say this in the wake of 3 significant departures from this landscape. Mr. Trevor Marshall, Mr. Pedro Welch, Professor Pedro Welch, and the other gentleman Mr. Watson, Professor Carl Watson. Those are and were 3 gentlemen whose work concerned itself largely with matters of heritage, and that we have tragically lost them does not mean that this country must lose its appreciation for matters of cultural heritage. And if we can save those cannons at Oistins, we shall retrieve some of our cultural heritage, cultural and natural heritage. So that is an appeal to the minister to consider under the jurisdiction of this act, to go to Oistins, send some officers to Oistins, and to retrieve those cannons, those ancient cannons from the sea. The minister may or may not be aware that there was a point at which the Coast Guard was being constructed at that Oistins location. And if it were to have been constructed, it would, I think, fall under Barbados Port Inc. That was abandoned, but the cannons have apparently also been abandoned. So please, Minister, return to Oistins and have one of your authorized employees retrieve, salvage those items that languish within the sands at what they call it Miami Beach. It's not a name I like. It's not a name I like. That's not Miami, that's very much Oistins, the beach behind the police station. I heard reference to the cruise ship industry, and that caught my attention. There's no sight quite as beautiful, whether during the day or at night, when we as patriotic Barbadians look at the harbor. I like to look at it from Cayfield, and that is to say, the top of that street. Cayfield, you go to the top. It is within the constituency of St. Michael North. There's no one here who, apart from me, who knows St. Michael North well. So you drive up.
I remember you used to live in St. Michael North? You used to live in St. Michael North? I remember?
Yeah.
Just checking.
Northeast, Your Honor.
You used to live in Northeast?
Northeast.
Grisettes, right?
Grisettes.
I'm just checking. In close proximity to North.
Oh, yes.
I see.
Yes, the other side of the road is north.
I fully understand that, I know that, sir.
But you know, these borders are artificial.
Right.
And to take a drive up that hill, I'm not going to give the name of the hill. I can, but I don't want to disclose secrets to anyone else who is here. Because if you drive to the top of that hill, you come off Kayfield, turn by Cumberbatch's shop, and you go up. And that offers the most beautiful view of the harbor, unless you're on Kayfield campus. And you actually see the planes when they're going in to land at the airport. So that being the only person in here who can speak with authority as to this vista, I will say...
In St. Michael North.
In St. Michael North, yes, I am the only person in here.
I understand that.
I am the only person in here
St. Michael North.
St. Michael North.
Not Christchurch South, no other than St. Michael North. I'm with you, Honourable Member. I'm all ears, very attentive. I've been listening as I'm supposed to do.
So that is a beautiful vista. But the point is, when you go to that place and you see the harbor, somebody has to take credit. Somebody has to take credit. It's not the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central. But when we see 3 and sometimes 4 ships in the harbor at night, absolutely beautiful. During the day, there are thoughts of bounty, which is a word that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central used in here falsely a lot a few weeks ago. But Barbadians feel good when we see the port filled with cruise ships. And I heard the Honourable Minister say that we have 463, and that is commendable. I wonder if the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central meant 463 ships, or a few ships that visit 463 times. The former. Clause? I see. So that is something that makes us happy. There are 463 calls and not 463 ships, so that the public is not misled. But we commend the Port Authority for its marketing that allows us to get 463 calls at that port, and that makes Barbadians very, very happy. Their cruise, and that is part of our export industry. A lot of people don't know that among economists, tourism is considered an export. What I've really enjoyed in the last 2 days, I move around this country a lot. I go to all 30 constituencies.
I'm listening, Honourable. Continue, Honourable Member. I'm all ears.
I like it when the chamber is happy. He left. I like it when the chamber is happy. But I was so happy yesterday when I drove down Spring Garden and saw these large cranes. And it told me, industry. A lot is happening. That gives Bajans a feeling of reassurance. Except that Bajans had greater reassurance when they used to see that gable roof filled with sugar. So that we want a port that is not only equipping itself for importation, which has foreign exchange implications, but we wish to see a port that is outfitting itself, and the government likes this term, retrofitting. This government likes a lot of terms and words. So we'd like to see a retrofitted port that is not only equipped for importation, but exportation. But that is not this Honourable Minister's fault. There are other Honourable Ministers who are charged with the responsibility of firing up this economy so that we can have an export industry. So that while I like to see those ships, 463 calls, those cruise liners and the cargo ships, and we congratulate the government for that. We want to see a port that is also busily engaged in an export industry so that when we import and send out foreign exchange, we also export and bring in foreign exchange so that there may be a veneer which really obscures the truth. And the truth is that we are importing more than we are exporting. But that is not the fault of the port. That is the fault of central government that has failed to generate this economy internally. Sugar is down. Right excellent. Our Walton Barrow said that one morning we are going to wake and we are not going to see a sugar industry in this country. Those prophetic words seem to be upon us based on what we're hearing, certainly in relation to co-op and the government's. The government does not know what to do with the sugar industry. It appears that way. It appears as if the government does not know what to do with the sugar industry. I grew up seeing the trucks up and down the Harbor Road with sugar, filled with sugar. We all grew up and see that, and saw that, I beg your pardon. And we don't see that as much now. And that absence reminds us that this economy may not be doing as well as it ought to do in terms of exportation to make this country prosperous. So that while we are happy that the port is retrofitting itself as a zone of heavy industry, that heavy industry may be concentrated more on importation than it may be on exportation. And I ask the government to let us see equality of effort, certainly as between exportation and importation. Where is this country going? You know, the port acts as a barometer to measure a government's economic performance. What is happening at the port really is a barometer as to what is happening with this economy. And if this economy, I repeat, if this economy is importing more than it is exporting, we have balance of payments problems. We have problems certainly in relation to retention of healthy amounts of foreign exchange. So that, let that port be the barometer. I know the minister has done a good job in terms of multiple pieces of legislation which reflect a very busy port. But we want, apart from a busy port, we want a busy country, and we are not getting that. The honourable member for St. Peter may express some disappointment if this debate did not stretch to Speightstown. And the honourable member for St. Michael West Central did make reference to Speightstown. One could easily believe that, the honourable member for St. Peter was very participant in the debate. He acted almost as a junior minister. Perhaps there's not a lot to do in labor since we don't have an employment rights tribunal functioning, so maybe there isn't much to do there. Although we would like to encourage the employment rights tribunal to reopen it can't reopen, the government has to reopen it. We would like that employment rights tribunal to reopen, but while it remains closed, the honourable member for St. Peter may now rejoice that the cruise industry has come to Speightstown. And if the honourable member for St. Peter is seen on the jetty welcoming those ships, that is a good thing. May not be a good thing for the people who live in Six Mains who want that land issue resolved. But if the honourable member for St. Peter is spending most of his time on the jetty, and it would be difficult to miss him, he's not short, 6'6" of him. So even if he tries to lower his height on the jetty, he will be identified. But the residents of Six Mains want to see him on land. because they want that land, and they want the land issue resolved. But if there is activity in Speightstown, it brings a more serious issue, and we won't speak lightly on this one. The expansion of activity, whether it is the port, Bridgetown, Speightstown, or the other ports, and you can't call them private ports because even the private ports have customs and immigration present, so they're not that private as people think. But it means that at a time like this, and we don't want the debate to go into these other areas, but we're into an era in which we're trying to secure our borders. And I won't go to the other discussion, but with the expansion of the port beyond Bridgetown, it means that there's a very heavy responsibility on the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central to ensure that the expansion of port activity does not translate itself into porousness of borders. And we know what we're talking about. This is an era in which failures of border control are resulting in severe social disorder and social dysfunction. I think I've said enough on that. It may just be a caution to the government that the excitement of expansion leads to a need to secure our borders, and that ought not to be difficult to do if this legislation, as it says, deals with the management. I read the objects very, very carefully, and the objects, the long title, an act to provide for the regulation of the management, operations, and development of the seaport industry, so that it speaks of the management, operations, and development of a seaport industry. But together with that objective is the parallel objective of security. If you're talking about management and operations and development of a seaport industry, consonant with that is the obligation to secure borders. And so the Barbados Port Inc. would not want to distance itself from that obligation to manage security. Sometimes I'm a little concerned, including yesterday. The tourists were in town yesterday. For those of us who are allowed to leave home on Sundays, if you drove by the port yesterday, there were tourists. I'm sometimes concerned. Tourists just walk in and out of the port, and sometimes I'm fairly concerned about that. I don't know if it obtains in other countries, but we might want to. I know we don't want to offend our tourists, except that we also want to impress our tourists that we focus heavily in this part of the world on security because it's for the benefit of the citizen, it's for the benefit of the tourists. Those of us who don't like to travel say we don't like to travel now because of the hassle. But when we do travel, we appreciate the taking off of shoes and belts and jackets. And for us, that is not hassle so much as it intends to protect us. And so I don't think a tourist will be offended if some focus or emphasis is placed on this question of ease. Apparent, I say, apparent. I don't speak with authority. I just see them walking in and out. Apparent ease of entry and exit into and from the port. That is something that concerns me as a casual observer. Perhaps there is something happening in there that casual observers like myself may not be aware of. But the larger point is that with all that this legislation may intend to or attempt to do, it can never exclude the importance of security. And the world now is more concerned about security than it is concerned about leisure. And we can have both. We can have leisure, but we can also have our security. So that I would ask the Honourable Minister, who is responsible for the port, to focus on this question of security as well, not only on business and the appearance of lots of business and bounty, as was claimed here a few weeks ago. Yes, focus on that, but do not exclude, do not discount the importance of security. So, Your Honor, those were my short interventions. I do not quarrel, as I said, with the legislation. As I've said before, this legislation and these pieces of legislation are normally part of international obligations. You cannot lag behind and ignore your international obligations. You must bring those international obligations, you must bring those treaties into national law, and you must incorporate them into your national law, and it must pass through this place. Passing through this place, sir, an opposition will not wish to oppose it, except that we will reserve the right to do a critique. I'm not going to use the word criticism, because criticism in here is met with much resistance. I don't know why. This is a parliament, a place of speech. Let us speak freely, and let us speak constructively, and let us speak having the interests of this country at heart. And if one man comes in here and does a critique and makes a little suggestion as to two words which become important, authorized employee, I urge this government to incline its ear to that discernment, that it may wish to consider amending what has been brought here to make it clear that this heavy weight of responsibility placed on an authorized employee should particularly identify that employee, so that when he attempts to collect his debt against even a ship, the court will not ask him, who are you? Are you an authorized employee? And he says yes, and then the court said, who authorized you? And then he can point to the legislation and say, look, this legislation identifies me, defines me as an authorized employee, so that the court will not have to guess. But if it remains as it is, it could disadvantage the watchman who goes as the authorized employee. And the question is not beyond the CEO. Who are you? I'm the CEO, but the legislation doesn't say that you're an authorized employee. So these things that appear so simple, that is why I think it was Mr. Bumble who said the law is an ass. And a lot of laypersons think that it is, except that we who are lawyers know why certain things must be done. Certainty. The law is not good law until it is certain, until you can identify it for its certainty, otherwise stated. So please, government, please consider the amendment to the legislation, and that is to say, Clause 71.1, Clause 65.1, please use that to pay some attention to those cannons that have been discarded in the sea at Oistins. And while we are all excited about the new cranes, which cost $66 million, please, and this is not for the port now, this is for the government, those persons involved in finance and economic affairs, please do something to this economy about which the port can be proud. I believe a crane that lifts imports in, I don't think you need a separate crane to lift exports out. So give those pieces of equipment an equal chance to do two jobs, export and import. And so we as a country remain concerned that this economy is weighted down on the side of importation. Let us begin to export as well. And so, Your Honor, those are my few critiques of the legislation. We are headed towards something of a quorum. A political quorum. And that is only to say that we want a government that is entirely interested in what this parliament is doing. So with those few words, Your Honor, you have been so kind today, and I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Leader, government business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 3:15 p.m.
Question that this honorable chamber be suspended until 3:15 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 3:15 p.m.